do I just go up? How do I follow that? Hey, everybody. It's good to be back with you. Now I can use my actual voice. I don't have to whisper. It's good to be back with you all again. 2 years in a row. Woot, woot. And it's good to see so many of you who I've been consulting with not on Zoom. To not have to hold, I was going to hold up a little square so you could remember me. It's like, look, Zoom, that's my name and everything. So, good morning, everyone. Hey, have you ever prepared for a presentation and done a wonderful, amazing PowerPoint presentation and then show up to the space and realize you forgot to tell them you had a PowerPoint presentation? So, I'm going to act it out for you. So there we go. So I hope you're happy. So what we're going to do today is we're going to spend the next little bit here together, and we're actually going to do two parts to this conversation, and they're actually laid out in your in the printed out version, but it's also the one you have, which is first we'll be talking about the theology of abundance and speaking a little bit about that as the foundation, although I can hardly do much better than the bishop and stepping out of the boat. That's really what it's about. And then the second part of this is I'm going to introduce you to a new framework, a new concept that we've been introducing into churches this year, which is talking about how do we speak of, it's always interesting when I'm talking about business concepts in churches, because people are like, wait, you're talking business stuff, but this one really, I think what happened here with appreciative inquiry, that's the second part, what happened there is people took concepts out of the church and took them to business. And we'll get to that and you'll see why I think it is so related to how the church views the world. But like I said, we'll get to that in a moment. So let us spend a moment now, if we will, speaking about God's abundance. God's abundance. How many of you here think that God is an abundant God? Just so that I know where I'm staring at. All right, good, yay! Preaching to the choir. Preaching to the choir. So, since the first human that we sort of think when that person showed up on this planet, there has been, up until now, more or less, about 117 billion souls on this planet. That's a lot of people. 117 billion souls. We're getting about another 140 million souls a year. So God likes numbers. God is like, let's add some more. On our planet, even though we've only identified about 2 billion species, 2 million species, we believe that there's about 8.7 million species on this planet. 8.7, we're only one. There's 8.7 million. So God just likes to create. God likes abundance. Let's look at the universe in our galaxy, if we will, for a second. Did you know, so we all belong to the Milky Way, right? We more or less remember that from Earth science. We are one little galaxy. Within our galaxy, we believe that there's between 100 and 400 billion stars in our own galaxy. And in the universe, or what we believe to be the known universe, we believe that there's about 2 trillion galaxies. God is abundance. God likes to just show off in how much God can create with the Holy Spirit. And yet, we oftentimes sit in our congregations, sit in our ministry settings, and say, if only we had the resources of St. David's down the street, then we could do so much more. If only we had the young people of that evangelical church down the street. Oh my goodness. We would be amazing, wouldn't we? If only. Here's a quote from Henry Nouwen. Each day holds a surprise, but only if we expect it can we see, hear, or feel it when it comes to us. Let us not be afraid of the unexpected. Let us not be afraid of receiving each day's surprise, whether it comes to us as sorrow or joy. It will open up a new place in our hearts, a place where we can welcome new friends and celebrate more fully our shared humanity. But only if we expect it. By the way, you will be getting my PowerPoint presentation slides as a PDF. So they're beautiful. I wish you could see them. Look, the quote's got, highlights and everything. So you'll get it, and that'll be great. So what Henry Nouwen is talking to us about, what Father Nouwen was saying, is what the core of my message, of this first part of my message to you today is. God gives us everything we need. Let me repeat that. God gives us everything we need. So God is giving us everything we need to do the work we are called to do in the world right now. So sometimes we sit there and we say those if only statements. And so you might be asking, well, what's the disconnect? Because at my core, you might be saying, Lorenzo, I really believe that God does provide everything we need. But on the other hand, I know that we're running out of money. That's not just me thinking that. That's a reality, right? I know, I want to believe that God is providing for us, but I know that there are fewer and fewer people in our church on Sunday. So I want to believe you, Lorenzo. So what is happening? Why is it that I don't have that strength to step out of that boat? If we are experiencing life as scarcity, it is because we have failed to receive the abundance of God in the form in which God sends it. If we are experiencing that scarcity, it's because God keeps sending us these beautiful, wonderful things of abundance, and we are blind to them. And do you know why? Because we want to tell God what God's abundance should look like. We are the ones who want to tell God, well, the only way that I will recognize your abundance if it's all of a sudden I win the lottery and have enough money. I will only recognize your abundance if there are so many people at church on Sunday that we have to turn them away. And God is laughing and saying, really? Really? Wow, O ye of little faith. The Gospel of John is full of examples of abundance. Do I need to wear that?
As long as you stay where you are.
I'll stay where I'm at. Am I staying where I'm at? Can everyone hear me okay? All right. The Gospel of John is full of God's abundance. In chapter 2, right at the beginning, we hear about the wedding at Cana. I love that story because there was absolutely, positively no mystical reason for Jesus to do that miracle. The only reason why Mary went to Jesus and said, could you do this? Well, she didn't say, she kind of demanded, right, do it. And he was like, woman, it's not my time. And then she gave him that look that says, I don't care if you are the Son of God, you will do this thing. And he did, right? He made the wine. But what's really interesting about that story, that abundance, is that Jesus did it so that a family wouldn't be embarrassed. That is it. There are no cosmological issues that God did with that miracle. But what that tells us is that even in the smallest things which we think shouldn't be important to God, God is saying they are important. So that's a story about the abundance of wine. In chapter 4, we find a woman at the well. And she says, wait, how are you going to get water? You don't even have a bucket. I don't know why I gave her an Italian accent. You go with it. You don't even have a bucket. How are you going to get the water out, right? And he says, I am the living water. And she's like, whoa. Whoa, dude. Who says they didn't do drugs? No. She's like, whoa. Tell me more about this living water. I want more of that. And once she realizes what's there in front of her, that it wasn't the water she was expecting, but it was a different kind of water, she runs to tell the town about what she has discovered. It's an abundance of this water. Chapter 6, the feeding of the 5,000. The disciples are very clear. They've been with Jesus for a while now. And they're like, dude, they're getting hungry. Nobody wants a hangry crowd. And he's like, well, go feed them. They're like, really, Jesus, thank you. Smart move. They're like, all we have is 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. He's like, go feed them. That will be enough for what you need to do. What little you think you have will be enough for what you need to do. And so they do, and we know what happens. There is an abundance. All of these tell us how the people of God found it hard to conceive of an abundant life breaking through because of the form in which it came. And the story, by the way, the whole of Jesus' story is filled with this, even to the end. Judas wanted Jesus to be one kind of savior. The one who's going to get on a horse, get an army, and bring down the Romans. And Jesus says, that's not my abundance. My abundance is love. And you want to see that love? It will pour out of my hands as my blood as I do this for you. If we accept, and here's the caveat, if we accept God's abundance, it will likely mean changes. It will likely mean that we have to change not only how we see ourselves, but how we see the church, what it means to be church. It might be changes in setting up structures that don't place us at the center, but rather that place God at the center of the story. Because oftentimes when we gather in our meeting rooms, when we gather in vestry, we'll sit there and we'll be talking about what I can do or what you can do. What about what God can do? If God is at the center of the story, what does this look like? Rowan Williams has this great quote that says, God's action in the world, in other words, the way God works in the world, is designed to draw people out of themselves, which is exactly indeed how love functions. To draw us out of ourselves, of what we think we are. And this other quote from Sam Wells, who's just a theologian that I really, really just love to follow. He said this about the story of the Good Samaritan. He says, only when the man by the side of the road is beaten up and left in the gutter that he's prepared to accept help from a Samaritan, because a Samaritan is the last person he would accept help from. Had he been in good shape and the Samaritan offered help, he would have said, no, thank you, you filthy, dirty thing. And yet it is only when he's left there by the side of the road, beaten up. Do any of us feel beaten up right now? Do any of us feel that you've undergone a lot with a pandemic, with changing world around us that tells us of a world that doesn't value church or what we have to offer? Or perhaps things were going okay and then a flood comes along? Are you all tired? Perhaps this is a time for us to see where God might be sending help in all sorts of places. But most of us, if we were to place ourselves in the New Testament, wouldn't dream of accepting help from the most places in which God is sending. We would be that Samaritan who feels too much pride. And so sometimes this place that we're in, this place where we're tired, this place where we need just someone to carry us and take care of us for a little bit, is the perfect time to accept God's invitation of abundance. So So let me give you some examples of abundance in the church. And actually, I'm going to begin a long, long time ago. In a galaxy far away. No, this is actually our galaxy. We're still here. Anthony Vivaldi, right? You've all heard the Four Seasons probably here and there. Well, he wrote a thing called the Ospiera della Pieta. It's one of his best-known pieces. Do you know why he wrote that piece? He was actually a priest, and he was in charge of an orphanage. And his orphanage was running out of money. Sound familiar? And so he's like, what do I have? How do I raise this money to maintain this orphanage? And so what Vivaldi did is he actually wrote this piece of music. He said, I will play this classical music for the richer people in town to come in and experience it, and they will give me money for it. And he did. But the thing is, he was still even had more limitation, that his orphanage was full of little boys. And so what he did is in the Magnificat, which is considered one of the best parts of that piece of music, is written for the highest of voices. Because those were his little boys. Those were the ones who were in his orphanage. And of course, he was able to save the orphanage by doing this. So Vivaldi is actually one of the earliest examples we have of social enterprise to help the church do the work that it's called to do. He could have just sat there and said, well, I don't have enough money. How am I supposed to take care of these little ones? Or he could have looked around to say, what do I have that I can work with to do the work? There's a church in Hollywood, California, where I am from. It's called St. Stephen's Episcopal Church. And when the rector showed up there 20 years ago, it was in dire place. It was just in a bad spot. He didn't have enough money, and he had this place that used to, and this might sound familiar to some of us, used to have so many kids that they had several classrooms for when there were so many people in Sunday school. And he was like, well, what am I going to do now? I don't have enough money. I have less than 6 months, or I'm out of a job here. And so he looked around, and he found out that Hollywood is a very artsy place. And he found out that he did this, the sheet of his abundance. And he found out, well, I have these classrooms. What will I do? So he created a pre-K. And this pre-K focuses on the arts. So that was his little niche. And the church is known for supporting the arts for so long. And so he was able to build this little preschool that now supports the entirety of the ministry. Because in Hollywood, you get to charge parents $1,500 a month for each one of their kids to be in this preschool. And he has about 65 kids. So do that math.
It costs that much here, too.
Okay, there we go. So good for you. So what he did is he looked at, what do I have? What are the assets that I do have? What is the abundance that God has provided me with? You want people to teach art? If only I could find an actor to teach acting in this place called Hollywood. Oh, maybe someone that's out of work could do it. I don't know. Right? So he was able to do that and find that. By the way, that little preschool has now spread and is at a different church, which is also financing that other church that had been closed and was reopened with the preschool first, and then the ministry started. And now he's doing it to a third and a fourth church. I actually hired a writer from the LA Times to write the story, not because it's going to be in the LA Times, that's inconsequential to us, but because I want to share it with bishops. I want other bishops to, because for so long, the myth around the Episcopal Church has been, never, ever, ever start a school to fund your ministry. We now have evidence that that's not necessarily true. But that's just one example. St. Martin in the Fields, London, was a sort of run-down church in central London, right off Trafalgar Square. And they're like, well, what do we do? We have all these people. They had this program right next door to them, feeding the homeless, and the program ran out of money. The city's like, we don't have enough money to feed as many people that are coming to get food from this program each day. And they're like, well, how do we help? We feel that we're called to do this work. And so their undercroft, the crypt underneath St. Martin in the Fields, they're like, well, what if we were to turn that into like a crypt cafe? Well, It's a massive enterprise now. That its staff is about 100 people, and there are thousands and thousands of people that go through that each and every day. And from that, they're able to feed the people that go to the homeless program next door for food. They also looked at it and said, as I was talking to the vicar, and was telling me when I first showed up there was a fight. Because during the lunchtime, the priests were like, we need to do services so that people will come in and be experienced to God. And the music program, they do about 300 concerts a year there at St. Martin's. They're like, we want to do more concerts because that's when people can go to the concert. And so what do? They actually got together and were able to merge, like, what if we do a concert that's actually a talk about the music, which is generally religious music, is classical music, so it can be a little bit of both. And now great sacred music is actually featured on the BBC. They looked at what they had, and they were able to figure out where is God's abundance in this. All of this, my friends, it's about adjusting our imagination. Every time we say the word, if only, the phrase I guess, if only, that should be to us an invitation that we're not thinking big enough. That should be to us an invitation to say, where is God's abundance in what we're looking at here? If only should lead us to new, interesting, dynamic, and innovative ways of being the church. Rather than being something that stops us, it says, if only we did have those resources, well, then we would be something. We say, well, what do we have? And from the things that we do have, I want to give you one more example. There is a bishop in the UK, Bishop Philip North. He and I have nothing in common. Nothing in common. His theology is, he's very, he doesn't believe women should be empowered. He doesn't believe that LGBTQ are, but he's honest about it. He's who he is, right? But that's that. But he gave a conversation one time. He gave a talk where he said, if our only word that we ever look at when we're looking at places of ministry is the word sustainable, then we are heading towards being a church of and for the rich. Because we will only maintain churches where we quote unquote can maintain them. And so he says, you want to grow your church? Go to where the poor are. They need to hear the good news more than most. They want to hear some good news in their lives. But they won't be able to be with you perhaps on Sunday. They won't be able to put money in your coffers. But is that what we're called to do? Who is at the center of our story? Is it us and our building? Or is it God and making disciples? I'll give you one final example. A priest in the Diocese of Norwich in England. He actually quit his job as vicar. He said, I am the problem in this church. They can't afford me. And he said, God, I think you can help us do ministry without money. And so I will get another job, but I will still minister in this place. His congregation now has 150 people. They meet in house churches. They don't even have an expense of a building. And he's got about 18 of these congregations. He says, never grow bigger than your living room. It's his philosophy. So he moved to a barn, by the way. It's like, I want to be in a bigger living room. So he built a barn. He lives in a barn with his family. That's a little too far for me, but nevertheless, because he wanted a bigger space for people to be able to meet. And he trains others. In the UK, they use the term pastor much more loosely than we do here. And so what each one of those houses has, the person who leads it, the lay person that leads it, is a pastor, a house pastor. He has a congregation of 150. The diocese doesn't really know what to do with him, or the congregations, but they recognize that these people are making disciples, and they recognize that they're living into a rule of life. These are examples that invite us to look at the abundance, including when it might look different than what we expect. Friends, during the pandemic, before the pandemic, can you guess what percentage of congregations were digital? Yeah. It's about 1% of the Episcopal congregations were actually broadcasting their services. 2 weeks into the pandemic, we were all televangelists, right? Had you asked people before then, they would have said, no, we don't do that. That's not who we are. Yet they were sort of forced into it, right? And so here's the question. Here's what I want you to do. This isn't for you to do here. This isn't for you to do in front of anyone else, so you don't have to be embarrassed by the answer. But the next time that you have one of those if only moments, if only we had more resources, if only how to figure this out. What if you had a gun to your head and said, you need to figure this out or you will die? What would you do then? Or maybe not even your own life. If someone was holding like your little puppy and saying like, if you don't figure this out, if you don't figure a way of making this work with whatever it is that you do have right now, this little puppy dies. I know that sounds odd, for lack of a better. Then I went to this talk where the guy threatened puppies. I'm not sure about God's abundance anymore. That's not the point. The point is, if we had a life and death choice, we would find a way. We limit ourselves. Not only that, we limit God. So what would it look like if we were to walk out and say, we're going to look at our church, we're going to look at our ecclesiology, the way we think about church, and say nothing is off this table. And you know why that's important? Because young people will require that of us. They no longer want the church like that is the church that we are giving them. They no longer will come to our churches. Now, I'm about to share with you something that won't be actually released until December. We did a survey. We put a survey out into the field. We, in this case, is the Lutherans, the Presbyterians, and us, the Episcopalians. We put a survey, 3,119 people responded. It's a margin of error of 2%. It's a national random survey of people between the ages of 25 and 39. We wanted to find out what happens when nuns, not the ones with habits, thank you ma'am, but the ones, the NONES, right, no religious affiliation. What happens when nuns get together with other nuns and have little nuns? What happens to the faith? Well, what you think might happen is exactly what is happening. It is the least of their concerns. We literally gave them a long list of things that they were concerned about. And the least of their concerns was whether or not the faith was transmitted to the next generation. In some cases, something like 17% of the people responded saying that if their kids came back to them and said, I want to participate in a religious community, that they would actively dissuade them from doing this. This is the future. And you're all like, back to God's abundance, please? I see good news in there. Because what this survey also told us is that these people are thirsty, that they are spiritual, that they hunger for the good news in a different way. They are not going to walk into our churches because we have red doors. They're not going to walk into our churches because we think we're the friendliest in town. We have to go out and meet them where they are. We have to go out and have conversations with them where they are. And what does that call from us? A different way of being church. And this also goes back to seminaries, and we have to have that conversation as well at some point. Now, when you get your PowerPoint presentation PDF, the last two slides of this part of the conversation are what it was called an abundance inventory, where you would be able to look at it, and I give you the 6 steps to be able to do it. I encourage you to do this. Maybe do it with your vestry, maybe do it in your congregation. Do an abundance inventory where you begin actually by listing what are the things that we lack. What are the things that we don't have? And then you go on about and write the things that you do, and you add in the Bible in there. So I commend that exercise to you to be able to do that when you're back home. So that's God's abundance. God's abundance is there for us, but remember the key is that we have to be willing to look at it in a different way. Now, one of those ways that I want to get you to know a little bit better is appreciative inquiry. Appreciative inquiry in this overview that I'm going to give you. Now, you could spend This was actually created at Wake Forest University. You can spend a whole semester learning about appreciative inquiry. We're going to focus on the main core parts of appreciative inquiry. But let me tell you why appreciative inquiry is good for us. Why I believe that it's actually very theological. One, it focuses on your strengths. It focuses on the things that are already good about the work you're doing, or on the aspirational strengths you may want. And I'll give you some examples of that in a moment. Let me tell you a story right now, actually. I love stories. I'm a story guy. So imagine, this is actually a true story. There was a little motel chain. I forget where they were. They were somewhere in the South. And they're like, we want to be better. We want to be better. So when the consultants came in and said, we have to focus on the strengths, they're like, we don't really have many. We have more roaches than we have clients. They're like, well, that's a starting point, I suppose. We don't want that. So they're like, okay, if you were to aspire to something, what would that look like? They're like, well, like the Four Seasons. And what they did is they took the management team and said, we're going to go stay at the Four Seasons for 2 days. And we're going to write down all the things that we really, really, really admire about the Four Seasons. Because we're going to figure out how do we make those things happen in our place. This is the same for us, by the way, when we get to the first D, we'll get that in a moment, is if you don't feel you have the strengths, this is where the aspirational part is. If you're like, we really want to have a better children's program, but we don't have a children's program, it's hard for you to focus on what your strengths are there. So what you can do, though, is you can go down the street to the non-denominational church that you know has a good children's program and be like, what do we really like about this? One of the things we probably don't like about it is that they scan children in and out, right? Like books or groceries. So, but you want to be able to find aspirational even if you can't. But we'll focus on strengths. 2, it's very inclusive. It also requires participation from most of the people in your congregation. Because this is where having more people is actually a better solution to this. 3rd is positive and uplifting. Because you're not focusing on problems, you're focusing on good things. 4th, it is very adaptable. The same way that it can work for a hotel chain, we have seen now that it can work for churches. It can work for any context in which you take it into. And finally, it's a shared vision. It's a shared vision that you all walk in through this process together and develop. All right, so that's why I think that it is so biblical. It's just positive, it's good, it's wonderful. And I encourage any of you that have not, has anyone here heard about appreciative inquiry before? Okay, oh, wow. Look at all you people. All right. So, the first thing we need to do, and this you may want to write down on your little sheet. Again, you're going to get slides, but in case you don't, is you need a main topic. You need something that you're going to be looking at in order to make it better, right? That just makes sense. But there are some characteristics of your topic. The main important thing about this topic is that it has to be shared in the positive. So for example, you wouldn't just say like, we need to work on our communications. You would say, how do we get compelling communications? So you would work on compelling communications or dynamic communications, right? What do you want them to be? If someone were to look at the end of this, at your communication strategy, what would be that thing that they would call it? And they'd be like, oh my God, it's amazing communications that they have. This church communicates better than any other. They're dynamic, they're innovative, whatever it is. It's in the positive that you're looking at and not like, oh, how do we fix our bad communication problem? Let's say, for example, you were going to look at learning and development. You might be something more like continuous learning. Continuous learning, disciple making, right? Instead of saying we don't have a formation program, you say, how do we make a formation program that's compelling enough that people want to come to it, right? So how do we make a sticky, formation program? Instead of looking at how the leadership of the congregation is working, you might call it something like, how do we get to a point where our leadership is inspirational leadership? How do we get to a point where we see integrity in action? And that's what you would call it, integrity in action or inspirational leadership. Maybe you're talking about commitment or enthusiasm and the lack thereof. And the way that you would position it in the positive is culture as an advantage. That people recognize that you have such enthusiasm here, that the culture of this place is such that it brings people in? Or how do we create a let's do it attitude? Following on the bishop's address, you might be like, how do we create a culture that's all about stepping into those scary moments of ministry? Stepping out of the boat. I kept thinking of Don't Go Rocking the Boat, right? Remember that song? Anyone?
Guys and dolls.
Guys and Dolls, thank you very much. All right, we have a winner. All right. So it's stated in the positive. It's something that's desirable. That should go without saying, right? You don't probably want to do appreciative inquiry of something you don't want. It is driven by curiosity and genuine desire. You have to be very curious as you're doing this work. 4, you want it to be consistent with your values. What this means is that you don't want to go after something that's not something who you are. I'll give you a more precise example. The thing I told you about, like, oh, we want to be aspirational about having young people in our church. So we're going to go look at the non-denominational church because we want to have like a really compelling youth program. Well, before you go running having kids in your church, make sure that that is something you want. And are you ready to have children in your church? Right? I have seen on more than one occasion where people, when a baby starts crying, the priest is like, could you go outside, please? Tell me when that parent is coming back. Yeah, exactly. So make sure that you have looked at your own congregation and that it's not just us who are in the vestry who are like, oh, we should get more young people, but are we ready to receive younger people? If we're looking at young adults, are we ready to rethink how we do our services, our music? Are we ready to not play our organ? Oh, wow. Could it be? So, you want to select a couple of these topics to go into and do appreciative inquiry about. All right. For our purposes here today, our topic is going to be compelling communications, because I think that churches in general could do a better job in how we communicate out to the world. A great example of this, by the way, how many of you know your open rate for your electronic newsletter? Bishop, I'm done. Good luck with this. All right, so how many of you send out an electronic newsletter, or your church does? Okay. And how many of you that do that know your open rate of your newsletter, or what that even means? Okay. So an open rate is how many people of the ones that you send it to actually open that email. All right? So in general, by the way, I can tell you that in the church world, a 25% open rate is considered normal. That's pretty average. If you have like an open rate of 40 or 50%, you're knocking it out of the ballpark. If you have an open rate of like 75%, you're just lying. Just stop lying right there. No one's gonna believe you. 75% of my family doesn't open up my emails. That's just impossible, right? So, anyways, all right, so going to the point, we can do a little bit better with communications. So let's talk, for example, and let's say, for example, that was we were all, imagine that we are all just one congregation. Greta, thank you very much. We're all the congregation of this cathedral right now. This is our cathedral, like she said at the beginning. Woo! Here we go. All right. The first phase, there are 4 phases, and they all begin with the letter D. When you get the PowerPoints, they're even in color. Just saying. All right. The first phase is the discover phase. This is where we are appreciating the best and deconstructing it. So, for example, if we were that little hotel, when we went over, I'm just going to point out that's the Marriott where I'm staying. If we went over to the Marriott and stayed there, and we're like, okay, what we like is they have live music on Friday nights. They do, actually. It's kind of cool. They have a little bar. What I don't like about it is the TV's at a really weird angle. Like, your bed faces to the window, which is great because it faces the lake, but your TV's over here and hidden by the closet. You're like, I want to watch TV while I'm in bed. So I listened to TV last night. So what you want to do is you want to figure out in this discover phase, what is it that either we do really well. So if you do happen to have a newsletter with an open rate of 75%, God bless you. There's God calling you, telling you to stop lying. Again, I told you, stop lying in church. But you want to figure out what's working about it. Or if there's a newsletter that you get that you really, really like and look forward to getting, say like the TriTech newsletter that comes out once a month and you can sign up for at tritech.org. Little shameless plug. If you find one that you really, really like, you can be like, what about it do we like? Like for example, I read I don't read 6 newspapers a day. I skim 6 newspapers a day. But I love getting their newsletter because that's a way of helping me skim through the newspapers. And there are some that I really like and there are some that I just hate how they do their newsletters. So I would look at the ones that I like. Like, are any of you familiar with Axios, the news company? Yes. Yeah, maybe get some of their newsletters. They created this thing called Smart Brevity. Anyways, it's a whole way of doing newsletters. They actually did it. I just want to share this with you as a side note. They did this study. Turns out that when your brain sees like a paragraph of just words, I just love how they describe it. Your brain gets sad. I'm like, oh, I don't want a sad brain. That's bad. So you break it up into having more little bullet points and having bolding and stuff like that. Anyways, that's how the TriTech newsletter is actually done. Now we do the Smart Brevity thing. So you look at what is best and you ask some questions. So can you share some examples of communications that truly engaged and inspired you? What communication method or techniques have you found most effective in sending a message? I'll give you another example from our experiments. We know, statistically, we've proven this beyond the shadow of a doubt. If you send out a text reminder rather than an email reminder that you have a special event tonight at the church, you will get 25% more people showing up. Just by reminding them. And you know why? Because A, not everybody opens up all the emails on time, yet 98% of people look at text messages. I'm still looking for those 2% of people that don't read their text messages. I don't know who they are or why they don't. It's on your phone. How do you not look at it? But they're there. Some of you are like, that's me. Oh yeah, talk to me. So, have you ever experienced any memorable instances where communication was pivotal in creating positive outcomes? How do you believe effective communication contributes to the building strong relationships and connections? These are the sorts of questions that you look at, and again, you're going to get all these questions when looking at communication. But if you were looking, for example, at like, how do we do our service in a way that young people will like it, right? We want to do it won't be a Sunday morning. If you're aiming for young adults, you might say something like, how do we do a Tuesday evening service that young adults will want to come to? And I can tell you some of the things that they would like, right? The research tells us is that you can't have just a sermon where you're going to speak to them and expect them to just hear. They're going to want to ask you a lot of questions. You need to have a lot of music. You need to have a lot of space for them. You need to make them feel incredibly welcome. Radical inclusion is very important to them. I was interviewing this young lady, and when she was talking about, and I asked her, she said radical inclusion. And I said, I'm just curious, when you walked into a space, if it was a physical space, what would it look like for you to say, wow, they really believe in radical inclusion here? She thought about it for a second. She's like, they would have a stained glass window of a lesbian couple and their kid. Instead of a saint that I've never heard about, they would have something like that just shows me that's important to them. I'm like, oh, that's kind of brilliant, actually. So I'm not saying that we need to put up stained glass windows, but I'm just saying that this is what you look at, right? You look at the ones that are working, and how are they working? Deconstruct them. Tear them apart into little pieces, like what works. Go to where the young people are and figure out what are they watching. So why are they going to this non-denominational sort of evangelical service? What do they like about it? Or you might say it's the energy. Okay, what makes that energy? Is it the music? Is it the stand-up act? Is it whatever they have there that's going on? What is it about it? Is it how they deliver the message? Is it the fact that the messages are delivered more like, self-help programs? Whatever it might be, but you look at it to deconstruct it and bring it out. So that's our discovery, right? We've discovered sort of what are the things that make something really, really good. And it might also be, by the way, that you have one service or two services a year that you're like, wow, we really knocked it out of the ballpark. Deconstruct that. Sit down. The next time that you do a service that you're like, that was amazing, and everybody just told us how good that was, spend time afterwards figuring out what really worked. Ask people. If someone says like, man, that service was amazing. I felt it in my bones. My little hairs were standing. I was like, yay, tell me why. Tell me what did it. What caused it. Was it the music? Was it my sermon? Was it the lighting? Was it the candles? Was it the incense? Whatever it was, find out what it was that caused it. Because all of us, every once in a while, do just knock it out of the ballpark. So deconstruct those moments as well. So that's our discover. So from discover, we go to dream. The dream phase of appreciative inquiry, which is really all we're doing, is it's in the name, right? You're envisioning a better future, making the very best of what you can do. So you might dream of, what could our congregation be? How do we expand people's sense of what is possible? This is where God's abundance also comes into this. To not be limiting God to only this box. Right? Not be limiting God to the way that we think God should be, but rather being actually open to that, as long as it still keeps within our values, of course. So, going back to our example of compelling communications, some of the questions we might ask ourselves, what would a world with perfect, compelling communications look like for you? So you might do it for your church. What would a church that has really, really compelling, really good and compelling communications, how would that church be different than what you have right now? Because you're not just seeking to do compelling communications for the sake of doing compelling communications. There's a goal in there for you. So what is that goal? Can you imagine a scenario where your church is so compelling that it deeply resonates with young people? What would that look like? Right? This is an opportunity for us to dream. Hence, the second D is for dreaming, right? What does that look like when we do it right? If we were to take, going back to the little hotel, if we were to take what we learned at the Marriott and put it in our little motel chain, what would that look like? Of course, we don't have the immense resources of money that they have to put televisions that are facing the wrong way, but how might we do it in our place in a way? Could we invite live music? What would that take? There's always someone trying to learn more about music and trying to gain more experience in front of an audience. What would that look like in our little motel? So the same in our congregation. If we go out and we're dreaming that we can have a really, really amazing young adult program, what would that look like in our setting? We've seen it, what it looks like in the non-denominational church. What would it look like for us that's authentically Episcopalian? That's nice. Spit on this, sorry. What would that sort of be? So I can imagine, for example, this is just me going off the cuff here and off the slides. But what would a space, if this space were to be turned into a space for young adults on Tuesday nights, what would it look like? And I've seen it here before, right? Where the chairs would be in the round and with the altar in the center. It would begin with people just gathering and sharing each other's stories. We would have live music or music of some sort. In fact, you don't even have to have live music. You can have a good playlist on Spotify that can create that space for you. Incense is really big with young people. They really like it. They love that about our tradition. So if you were to lower the lights on a Tuesday night, have a center where people can bring an artifact of what's weighing them down right now, and maybe invite them with a question like, bring a song that's really important to you because it says something that you can't say out loud. Because you know what they're really into? They're really into mental health and talking about their anxiety. And they want to talk about that. So if you created a safe space that was just for them to share those stories and break bread together on a Tuesday night, they're going to start to come. They will invite their friends and be like, and don't think that they're going to be there every Tuesday. Let's get that out of the way. You do it sporadically, like once a month or something like that. But you make it a special place for them to come, be heard, share their anxieties. Now you're talking their language. But if our only expectation is that they're going to come in here, pick up the hymnal, and pick up the red book, and follow along and do the aerobics with us, we're going to lose them. Was it the aerobics part? Now we're going on to our third D. So we have what was the first one again? Who remembers? Discovered. The second one was? All right, our third one is our design phase. In other words, we've deconstructed how the hotel does it. We've dreamt about it, what it would look like in our place. Now it's how do we make this happen? This is our design phase. So we've identified our ideal. We engage our community into making this a reality. And we take actionable steps and we design what are those steps so that we can actually do this. And so we set clear goals, expectations, timelines, priorities. That's otherwise we're just dreamers. Thank you. I was trying to think of the Beatles song. Just a dreamer. Anyways, Imagine. I learned a long time ago that if you have to hand out a little pamphlet with your jokes, so you've decided to laugh at my joke, and you have to explain the joke to people, it's not as funny. So I should have just left that alone. I was stuck there for a second. So as we're designing, these are some of the questions we might ask ourselves. Again, going back to compelling communications. Which specific steps can be taken to integrate compelling communications into our overall outreach efforts? So now that we know what those compelling communications look like, let's say, for example, that we've decided that the one thing we're able to do right now is that we're going to stop making brains sad by sending paragraphs, and we're just going to start using bullet points, right? All right, so who's going to edit our newsletter to make sure that we're doing this? Or who's going to read the little Smart Brevity book that teaches you how to do this? Or who's going to put it through ChatGPT? By the way, you can do that now, and it'll do it for you. Did you all happen to watch, total shameless plug again, we did a webinar last week on ChatGPT for communication and outreach for the church? Nobody watched it? Oh, yay, one did. Thank you very much. Scott's my friend. No, here's what I would, you can get it online now. It's just go to tritank.org, you can get it. But, all right, let me just, again, I'm pausing, I'm going off script here, Bishop, I'm going off script. Tell the affiliates we're running late. Anyone remember that one? Ted Koppel, right? At the end. All right, so we're not running late, don't worry. I wouldn't do that to your lunch. So how many of you have heard of ChatGPT? Okay, so for those of you that haven't, ChatGPT is what's called, well, never mind. It's artificial intelligence. I was going to go into the life learning model, language learning model, but that's not what you need to know. What you need to know is that, think of it as Google, but that's really smart. So in other words, you don't have to say like, Thai food near me. You can begin by saying, I really don't know what to eat tonight. Ask me some questions so I can determine what I want to have for dinner. And it will start asking you some questions like, okay, are you in the mood for any particular this? Or it'll just ask you a question. Eventually it'll say, you should be having Thai food tonight. And then you can say like, could you find me a Thai food near me? And it will. Because it's been updated. It used to be that when it first launched a year ago, it was only up to information from 2021, but now it's up to date. It is actually a search engine. But something else that it does, if any of you have ever tried to reach out to the Latino community and you don't speak Spanish, it does amazing translation in both directions. So if you want to create something that's in Spanish, you put it in exactly the way you want it in English, and you tell ChatGPT, and I want it to be in colloquial language, or I want it to be in very formal Spanish, or whatever it is, and it will do that for you. So ChatGPT, let me help you with that. So anyways, ChatGPT, what it can do also, and bring it all back together, is it can help you with compelling communications. So you can write something the way you would normally write it, put it into ChatGPT and say, could you return this back to me in the way that a 25-year-old would understand it? It's not going to give you slang, don't worry about that. It's not like, yo, bro, you must come to church, it's none of that, because you need to be authentic. But it's going to give it, like, if we sometimes, I know this is going to sound, it's going to be hard for us to hear, but sometimes we tend to use churchy language as we sit in the nave of the church, and then there's the chancel, and then the bishop has a crozier, all these things. And they're all like, wait, what are you talking about? Why are you doing that? So, anyways, in the design phase, you can use something like ChatGPT to help you design it. But what you're asking also some other questions is how can you involve young people in the design and creation of compelling communication of the content that you're doing? Are there any young people around you that you can tap for that? Are there resources or expertise you need to bring your vision of compelling communication to life? Maybe you're like, we know we want to do X, Y, and Z, or we know we want to do the smart brevity that Lorenzo was talking about. So the expertise would be like, we don't know exactly how to do that. So you would go and you would get the $12 book to be able to do that. So that's the design phase. What are the steps we need in order to get this going? So we started with first D, second D, third D. Our fourth D is destiny phase, which I think they were just looking, that's kind of a stretch if you ask me, but hey, it's where we empower, we learn, and more importantly, we sustain this work. Because how many times have we started something, it starts off great, and then 3 months later it goes right back to the inertia of the way the newsletter used to be, right? It's very common for that to happen. So what you want to do here is, again, you want to empower, learn from it, improvise, and sustain what gives life to this work. So some of the questions you might ask is, how can we ensure that the compelling communication becomes an integral and sustained part of our congregation's future? How do we make sure that this continues? Who do we put in charge of this that's holding us accountable for it? What role can you, or rather, what role will you personally play in championing and supporting compelling communication initiatives? Maybe you're the rector, or you're the senior warden, or you're the junior warden, or you're just a layperson in the church who has the most power, or you're part of the mafia known, the mafia known as the Altar Guild. We all know they're the most powerful, right? I said this last year, I'll say it again. Altar Guild, I respect you, I love you, whoever you are. How can you inspire and empower others within your organization to take ownership of your vision? How can you describe the long-term impact you hope compelling communications will have on your church's relationship with young people, for example? What legacy do you aspire to leave in terms of transforming your church's communication for future generations? And there's more questions that you'll get later. So those are the 4 Ds: discover, dream, design, and destiny. Discover something that's really, really good about the work you're either already doing or someone that you admire is doing it. Deconstruct it. Dream of how it would look in your setting. What would that look like? What would our church be like so that we actually get those little goosebumps? Then design a way of getting to that dream. What are the steps we need to that dream? And then finally, in our destiny, how do we maintain so that those steps continue even after we're gone? That's appreciative inquiry. And when we put it together with God's abundance, what we see here is a magical formula, for lack of a better word. God is ready to give us. Last night, so one of the great things about our little hotel here is that right next to the bed, I went to sleep, I was reviewing the presentation as I was going to bed, and I was like, and right next to it they have a little thing that says big idea. So if you wake up in the middle of the night with a big idea, you can just write it down. There's a pen in this little card right there. So I went to sleep and I was literally dreaming about you all, because I know that not everyone has a stone building called the cathedral in this part of Rome. I know that you're in rural areas. I know that some of you share ministers in the work in the way that you do your work. So I was like, what would be, Lord, I was like dreaming for you. Even though my knowledge of Vermont is the bishop's house, this place, and the airport. That's about all I've seen in the 2 years I've been here. I think last year we walked across the street to the park during lunch. So I might do that again today, but that's pretty much all I know. So tomorrow I get to see Barry. So yeah, there we go. I'm excited by that. So, but I woke up with this like random crazy dream, and I said, what about for those who are in a rural place where people aren't coming to their place, but they want to share with them communion? What if we wanted to? So you have to know something about me. I feel that what happens at this table is life-changing. I believe that this is one of those moments when heaven and earth really do come close to each other, And basically, Jacob's ladder is here. And what we're seeing are angels taking up all of our concerns and cares and everything that we offer up to God. And coming down on God's grace is to say, it is enough. You are enough. Right? So I sometimes when I'm passing out communion, I cry. And people are like, that's a weird man. Yeah, it's such a powerful moment. So that's why I was saying I think about communion. So I woke up and I wrote it down, DoorDash for communion. What if somebody could, DoorDash is a food delivery service. And you go on their app and you're able to say like, I want Subway, and they come and bring it to your door. What if somebody could reach out to your church and say, hey, will you bring me communion today? And you would.
We did it during COVID.
You did it during COVID? But what if we did it all the time? Now, what would that look like? Talk about God's abundance of just saying like, maybe there are people who are, because they've been so, there's another report that came out earlier this year that says something like 2/3 of adults have suffered trauma from religious institutions. 2/3 of adults. So can we blame them from not wanting to cross that threshold into a place? I mean, how many times do we have to beat someone before they're like, I'm not going to go back there, you just keep beating me. So, and so that's DoorDash for communion. I don't know how it would work or what it would look like or what, but I can only imagine that that's just an invitation. It's powerful when we accept God's abundance. The Church of England has a program. Have any of you heard of the Caleb Stream from the Church of England? The Caleb Stream. So the Church of England has 14,000 churches, but some of them are chapels of ease. They have 1 or 2 people once a month. You know, they're not necessarily big churches. A lot of them are historically designated, so they can't even add like solar panels to them. You can't touch them. And they're like, wait, we have to maintain buildings that you have now designated as historic, that we can't change anything in, but you don't give us money to do that. Yes! It's like, that was a bad deal. But one of the things that the Church of England realized, though, is that because, and this is a true statement, I heard it from the dean of St. Mellitus College in the UK, one of the theological colleges. I said, what's the most number of churches under one priest you've ever heard? He said, the most I have ever heard under one priest was 28. I'm like, there's just no way. It's like, there were a lot of chapels of ease and you would stop by once in a while, but that's even, and for those of you who's like, I have 3 churches, I agree, try 28, right? No, but one of the things that they discovered was that in these churches where the clergy would come by very infrequently, is that it was the lay people who were running everything, right? And they would do morning prayer, and they would keep up the building, they would just basically, the congregation was running. And so when someone had this one idea, it's like, you know, in a different universe, these people who are here, most of them are retired, would have probably chosen a life to become a clergy. Instead of the path they took, they easily could have gone on to become a clergy person. And so what they did is they created a 1-year program that leads to ordination as a deacon. It's actually 9 months of study, and at the end of the 1 year, they're able to be ordained as a deacon, and the Church of England has empowered their deacons there to do everything from weddings, to funerals, to burials, baptisms. The main things they can't do is obviously the Eucharist and absolution, and they do not give God's blessing, they ask for God's blessing. Right? And they have many people, they have something like 28 people that have started going through the program to be ordained, to go back exactly to those congregations where they already were, and they don't need a salary. Most of them already have their pension taken care of because they've worked their whole life, and they bring with them a lot of experience. And hence the Caleb Stream was born, because they looked at it and said, God's abundance is already there in the people that are there. It is us who are limiting them by saying you cannot be ordained unless you go through 3 years of seminary towards this work. So they looked at it differently. The same way they realized that they don't have enough people of color in ministry. And so they created the Peter Stream, which actively goes out and searches for people of color to say, we want you in ministry. We need you in ministry, rather than just saying, well, our doors are open, they can come and apply. Again, it goes back to the, how long have we been telling them they're not welcome here, and all of a sudden we open the doors and think they're just going to walk through? It's not going to happen. All of these, I hope, are showing as examples of how we can turn around things that we sometimes see as lacking into God's abundance. And through the use of appreciative inquiry, we can turn the things that already work really, really well within our own congregations into things that could become even better. Or even if we don't have them just now, but we have that little seed within us that says we want this, then what we can do is go out, deconstruct, and build something so that we can have that. And so when we gather later today, we're going to go back to a little bit from last year. We're just going to very quickly go through the how to try process that I taught you last year. We'll just talk about it really briefly. And then we're going to spend some time with the sheets that were either included in your purple things or that you were able to print out of the mission canvas. We'll go through that this afternoon so that you can begin to look at your own ideas and figure out the next steps to take. So that when you walk out of here today with your filled out mission canvas, you will have some of those next steps to take in achieving your own dreams and realizing God's abundance for your congregation and for this, the Diocese of Vermont. Thank you very much. There we go. Two things I want to share with you before I begin our afternoon session. One is I really need to look at agendas more carefully to see what I'm going to be following. First, I followed an amazing address and sermon by the bishop, and now I get to follow Eucharist. It's like, it only goes down from here. I'm sorry, this is it. Hope you're not. And the second thing I want to share with you is I continue to be amazed at what wonderful people you all are here in the Diocese of Vermont. Not only your generosity in welcoming me and just being such nice people. I live in Los Angeles. I'm not quite sure what to make of this. I just want to hand you my wallet. But it is amazing what wonderful people and how faithful you are in the work you're called. The conversations that I had and with you all during the break, it's just, I continue to be in awe, seriously, of the amazing work that you all do. So thank you for that. Thank you for being faithful and good Christians in this part of the world. So thank you for that, just as a personal sort of touching. All right, so we're going to begin this afternoon. I have been reminded that when I get excited, I speak fast. So, and I get excited easily. I'm like a puppy. So if I start to speak fast, do not be afraid to say, slow it down. And I will slow it down. I will not take it personally, just like all of you who pass me in the chalice to go to dip, whatever, it's your soul. No, so I will not take it personally if you tell me to slow it down a little. I will be right there with you. So, all right. So, first thing we're going to do this afternoon is we're going to recap a little bit of what we did 1 year ago. Who was here a year ago when you saw me? And you came back, suckers. Good, I'm glad. So we're going to go basically over the things that are in my book, the How to Try book that I wrote. That became a bestseller, thanks to my mother. Yay! I think she bought all the copies, mostly. So, in everything in this part of this work, it's very important, though, to be mindful of one thing going in. We're doing this for Jesus, right? I know that it may seem very mundane when we're looking at budgets and when we're looking at data and trying to come up with ideas and brainstorming. It can seem very normal, very everyday-ish. So it is especially important to be reminded that this work is for Jesus. All right, that aside, and I know just from the conversations I've had with you all that you're all Jesus-centered people. Before we go through the 3 steps, remember that we do this as a team. So it's important that you put a little team together. I would recommend 2 or 3 people, and that as you're doing this work, that you're that little team. So it is not just one person, but it is 2 or 3 people that are doing this work together. That Jesus guy was a smart person, and I believe he meant it when he sent them out 2 by 2. This is not work we're meant to do alone. So build your little team to do this. So the 3 steps. We're going to go step 1, step 2, and step 3. Each one of the 3 steps has some mindset, as you'll recall from last year. Step number 1 is generating insights. It's very similar to the discovery phase that we looked at when we were doing appreciative inquiry. They're not unrelated. And for this, your mindset is one of curiosity. All right? You want to be curious. Think of yourself either as an investigative reporter, or a sociologist, or even just Scooby-Doo. You want to be curious to find information, because here's what normally happens. The 3 steps, by the way, are discovery, ideation, and trying it, and we'll go into detail of all 3. Those are the 3 steps. But normally in the church, we begin in step number 2. And what that means is that really well-meaning people like you and I will gather together around the table in a church, and I have a lot more gray hair each and every day, and we'll be like, we need to reach young people. And we'll be like, yes, we need to reach young people. How do we reach young people? And we start thinking of ideas, and then we're like, okay, here's what we'll do. I think they like skating, so let's build them a skate park. And so we'll go outside in that little garden, we'll change it all, we'll make it into a little skate park, and nobody shows up, and we're like, but what happened? We built them a skate park. Where are all the young people? Well, we didn't do any research to find out a couple of things, like, are there any kids near us? If you're in Palm Springs, you may not get many. We didn't look at, is this what kids like to do? Turns out that 70% of Generation Z is into computer gaming and not outdoorsy gaming. So we didn't do the research to find out. This is why it's so important that we begin with discovery. And it could be everything from what are others doing that seems to be working, and how do we copy that, and might it work for us? To also like, well, do we want to do something to raise money? Do we want to be like Vivaldi and raise some capital to do the work we're called to do? And if so, what are some of the ideas? You know, thrift shops are a multi-billion-dollar industry. Cafes are very popular with churches. But did you know, for example, that the average Huntington Learning Center makes an average of $400,000 a year profit? So since Episcopal schools already have a good reputation, what if we started a learning center and got people in so that we could actually do some tutoring for them and help them out? Might that be a way? Well, you would begin by doing research. You wouldn't just go out and build the Huntington Learning Center at your congregation. You would go out and do some research. Are there enough children here to do this type of tutoring? Are they willing to pay the prices that we want to charge in order to make the profit? Those are the kinds of things we want to do in this first part of generating insights. An insight is every time you go, that's interesting. If we have a little bit of time as we do this part of my presentation, till what time do I go? Can someone tell me real quick? I go until 2:15. All right, I've got 45 minutes. All right, so if 2:10? Okay, got it. So hopefully I'll have a little bit of time to give you some insight. I just did another presentation and I shared it with the bishop. She's like, ooh, that might be kind of fun for them too, about Generation Z. I have some latest data to share with you about them that could begin to give you some of the generating insights part. So remember, generating insights, whatever your question is that you're looking at, how do we find out more? Who's doing it elsewhere? Go on Google. It's a wonderful place to find out what things are happening. Who's doing what? There are organizations that study the church on a regular basis. So if you want to find out more, for example, of generating these insights, you would begin with your design question. which is, what kind of business could we start to raise some money for us, right? That could be your design question. What if we started a business? You're like, great. So you begin with what's called secondary research, which is research that you don't do on your own, that others have done. So you go on Google and you're like, what businesses have other churches started? And Google will give you back some results, and then you go down that little rabbit hole. This is also why it's important to have other people on your team, because after an hour of going down that rabbit hole, you will end up looking at kitty videos on the kittens are just all over the internet. And there's no way that you won't be looking, look at the little kitten. Oh. It's like, oh wait, I was looking at businesses for church, go back to that. Remind me to show you the picture of my puppy. She's amazing. So secondary research. There are, by the way, organizations that study the church on an ongoing basis. So it is okay for you to look up some of their data to see what have they found nationally. So you may have heard of Barna or Pew or Gallup. If you haven't, you just Google who studies the church and you'll find out. Barna and Pew and Gallup, all of these organizations. So once you have your secondary research, then you want to do what's called primary research, your own research. What this means is that you're taking what you're learning from the macro, from the big picture, and you're saying, is this true of Vermont? Is this true of my community? Just because this crazy priest in Los Angeles was able to do it, will I be able to do it in Brattleboro? Did I say that right? Thank you all for coming. Good night. Is it Brattleboro? Burlington is a wonderful community. Let's talk about Burlington. Yes. Never mind. Someone from Brattleboro, wherever that place is, tell me later, please. So you want to do your own research. So find out, and what you want to do is just go around town. See if these things that the national, like big research told you, are actually true in your community. The final part is you want to have some conversations. So imagine that we are doing this thing about youth and young people, and you have found out, it's like, ooh, look at what they're doing over there at the non-denominational church or the Presbyterians. You're like, ooh, interesting. And then you're like, so it's obviously happening around here, and I read on Barna or Pew that this is what young people are into, or I heard from Lorenzo, these are the things that Generation Z is into. It's like, okay. Then you want to be able to figure out, will this be true of the people right around us? And this is where you have to this is like one of the hardest things for us as Episcopalians to do. To go out and talk to strangers. Stranger danger, we really learned that well. So the way you can do this is you can go to a local cafe, and whether you have a Starbucks or something similar, and just... Why is that so funny? Oh, there's no Starbucks here? There's like 3. All right. Whew. I touched the third rail. I talked about coffee in Vermont. That's going to go in my book. So wherever people go for tea or coffee, and you can just say, hey, can I buy you a cup of coffee if you just give me 5 minutes of your time so that I can ask you some questions? I'm doing a report or I'm doing a research project. You will be surprised how much people love to talk about themselves. And if you just say, if I buy you a cup of coffee, will you give me 5 minutes? They generally will. Now, will there be those people that won't? Of course. But you will be able to. So what you want to find out is, imagining, for example, that we're trying to go after young adults. Generation Z is between 9 years old and 26, 27. So let's say you want to talk to a 25-year-old. You just more or less look at the person and say, like, hey, can I buy you a cup of coffee? I'm doing a research project. And they'll generally say, yes, I have 5 minutes to give you. And then you can ask them, like, so I saw that there's a lot of young people going to, like, the non-denominational church. What's that for you? Like, have you ever gone to something like that? When was the last time you were in church? What brought you there? Where do you think you find, like, your community, right? Those types of questions. You'll be surprised what insights you can get from your own people in your neighborhood. Now, there is one caveat, and that is that what you hear from one person in a coffee shop is what you heard from one person in a coffee shop. Do not extrapolate and think that every 25-year-old now feels the same way that little Susie did when you asked her the question. So know that this is an anecdotal sort of evidence that you're finding for your research, right? So we got that. You're finding out research. You found some good stuff. You can come back as a team and be like, okay, we've got some info. Now you go on to step 2, which is developing ideas. Your mindset for step number 2 is to be playful. In the first one, we wanted to be curious because we were like, I need to find out more. In the second one, you actually want to spend some time and being playful about it. So if we had a question, say for example, that was, what if we started a contemporary service for young adults? Or what if we started a business to help raise money for our church? What might that be? You need to shift your question now, because the first question, what if, is a question about research. It's a question about finding out more. The second question now needs to shift to how might we, which is an action question. It's literally begging for steps to make this happen. And there are multiple ways in which you can do this. And again, if I had a PowerPoint, you would have colors and little charts and everything. You will get these in your when you get the PDFs. But just know that there are several ways that you can do this. You can do an easy one to do, by the way, if you want to get ideas from outside of your own sphere of influence, is what we call an e-storm. It's like a brainstorm, but over email. So it makes it dumb. It's not smart. It's not a brainstorm. Not just kidding. What you want to do is you want to write an email to your friend saying, hey, I'm working on a project for church. We found out these little bits of data. If you were building something based on this for young adults, what would it look like? And you send it out to 100 people. It's not, remember how I told you that not everybody opens up emails? So even if they're your closest friends, if you send out 100 and you get 20 back, you're in good shape. Do not feel neglected. Do not take out your Christmas card list and start crossing them off that you're not going to send them a Christmas card. It is okay. But what you've gathered, even if it's only 20, that's 20 new ideas that you have. And all that you're doing through this process is you're putting ideas in an idea bucket. You want to have as many ideas as possible. And then you sort of go, you can put them on a chart that you'll see here. This was really difficult because it's a graph that has 4 quadrants. And it has a hard to, or easy to hard on this axis. And then it has a normal, very simple idea to a very original idea on this side. And the harder, if you have something that's easy and anyone can do it, it's not very original, then it's like, we should start doing that right now. If it's something that's very hard and no one has tried it before, you might be like, is that really where we want to be? The sweet spot is in things that are more original, but that don't take a lot of resources. Again, you'll do this on your own. All you want to know is that you're coming up with a whole bunch of ideas to be able to say, which are the ones, instead of a graph, another way of doing it is trust your gut instinct. As you look at these ideas, and if you come up with one that you're like, oh, if we did this, how cool would that be? We would be that church. Maybe that's the one that you should be thinking about doing. And that takes us to step number 3. Again, this is just a recap. Step number 3. So step number 1 was, what was, anyone remember? Generating insights. Curiosity. And our curiosity was our mindset. Step number 2 was developing ideas, and our mindset was be playful, exactly. Step number 3, you'll notice that in these things I'm very Trinitarian. Step number 3 is trying, where you actually go out and try something. And your mindset here is to be bold. You want to be willing to step out of the boat, to try something, to take a chance. Because let me tell you something, you will not break the church. You will not. You will not end the church of God. So smarter people than us have actually gone out trying to end the church for centuries and have been unable to. So we, in our well-meaning days in Vermont, will not be able to kill the Church of Christ. Next scene is the church's over. Lorenzo, we killed it. No. And this is where we get to the mission canvas, and that's what I want to talk to you now. So, because this is how you want to try. So in your packets, if you have it, or I think it's, you should have if you got one of the purple ones, a sheet that looks just like this. I only had one handout for this whole thing because I had a beautiful PowerPoint. So we're going to go over this now. Does everyone more or less have it? Right? I'll wait just a second longer if you don't have it yet. The best thing about this thing called the Mission Canvas is that it'll take you about 15 minutes to fill it out. And this is what we're going to do in our pods when we're done with this part of our conversation. But we're going to go through it all in a second. It takes you about 15 minutes. The order in which we'll go through it, and it actually has numbers 1 through 9, is actually only a suggested order. It's okay when you get to something to skip it if you don't know the answer. Because you literally, what this is asking you to do, this one document, is asking you to do basically a whole ministry plan on one sheet of paper. And what you're going to find out is that, oh, we haven't thought about that yet. We haven't come up with what the answer to number 3 is. We need to think that through a little bit more. So that's what's good about this, is that you can do this. And you want to do one of these sheets, one per idea, as you're doing. And do not be intimidated by the sheet. This sheet replaces the time when someone says, I need you to go back and do a ministry plan for me. And you're like, oh, what does that look like? Just go online. You find it online. They're 80 pages. The moment you print it out, they're no longer valid because something's out of date. And then you never look back at that plan. This is a living, quick document that you can look at. You can do it easily. And we'll go through it in a second. And one time, I was presenting this exact concept at the Diocese of Ohio. And they happened to, we were at an indoor water park because that's the only way you can have a water park in Ohio in February, is if it's indoors. And so the youth were still out in the back of the room. It was a huge room because the water park hadn't opened yet. And there was a 14-year-old who heard me give this talk, and he got one of these, and he filled it out. And what's really cool is when we got to the part that says, how will we know if we succeeded? He wanted to get more babies in the church. God bless him. And how we will measure whether or not we've succeeded, he says, because there'll be more babies crying. It's like, well, that's a good method. If we hear more crying in the churches, there's more babies, or Lorenzo's preaching, one of the two. So, okay, so here we go. The first thing, which is in our upper right-hand side here, is I guess if you're looking at it this way, it's in your upper left, isn't it? All right, number 1 is the design question. So this was what we began with. This was should we open up, let's just say, should we open up a business to help fund our church? Let's just go with that one for the rest of this one, okay? As an example. So that's what you literally write there is, should we open up a business for our church? Then you would go to number 2. What is our solution? Assuming that you're literally filling out the mission canvas, it means that you've decided to open up a business. That theoretically that question has been answered for you. And now remember, we switched it over to how do we do this? So in number 2, where it says our solution, that literally is the business that you want to run, that you want to start. So what you want to do is, say for example, for our purposes, let's go back to the example that I gave earlier today, which was about St. Stephen's and the preschool that they have about arts. And let's say that you're like, I think we're in a pretty artsy neighborhood. It seems to be changing a little bit. So what would happen if we started a small little preschool for the kids in our neighborhood? Great, that's our solution. We're going to start an arts preschool for our neighborhood. Awesome. Number 3, who are the stakeholders? In other words, who can say no to the idea? If you're not already on the vestry, I would imagine you would probably, like, who's on the vestry that could say no to this? As I mentioned earlier today, our wonderful friends at the Altar Guild, they have a lot of power over these things, so you want to make sure that they're involved. You just want to find out if the rector has not been involved in writing this idea. The rector would be one of them. If it's something that in any way takes you outside of your own church, or that you just want to make sure you cross all your T's and dot your I's, should we tell someone at the diocese? Should we let the bishop know of this exciting idea that we're doing? Whomever the stakeholders are. And if there's one thing, by the way, that was ingrained in me in seminary, it was never, ever, ever let your bishop be surprised. That was the number one thing. It's like, it doesn't matter what you've done, just make sure your bishop hears it from you first, before they get it from the local newspaper calling for a quote. You know, whatever it is, make sure your bishop is never surprised. So that's who are the stakeholders, who are the people that are involved, and especially if you're like, is this person a stakeholder or not? Can this person say no and end the idea? That's how you really know whether or not someone's a stakeholder. Number 4, what is the elevator pitch? How do I say this to a room like this? We in the church sometimes can be a little verbose, for lack of a better word. We tend to begin our idea by saying, because we want to reach younger people and we've decided that our neighborhood has lots of young people, what we've decided to do is to open up a school so that we can get young people and maybe their parents, because that's the time to get the parents, is when they have kids. Like, whoa, you've spoken for 10 minutes and I don't know what your idea is. An elevator pitch, if you've heard that term before, means if you were in, imagine this elevator here, it's a particularly slow elevator, so you have a good time. If you were in this elevator for those 10, 20 seconds, could you say your idea in that time where someone would understand? So going back to our example, I could say, we've decided to start a preschool for our neighborhood in order to fund our ministry, and our focus will be the arts. That's simple. I don't have to give them the whole background of what we've done to get here, right? It's a simple little idea for us to raise a little bit more money. This, by the way, could be the same if you've decided to do a food bank. Because we follow Christ, you don't have to begin with all of that. You can just say, we're going to do a food bank because there's a need in our neighborhood and we feel that we can get more people involved. Perfect. Yes, ma'am.
Why is this so big as opposed to the other boxes?
Because she asked, why is this particular box so big compared to all the other boxes? If I give the wrong answer, a ruler coming out, I'm just afraid now. I'm having PTSD. Because it is believed that this is one that we'll have to edit a little bit. I honestly don't know why that one's so big. It just is. Now I've been stumped by a nun. That's it. I mentioned coffee, the nun stumped me. It's amazing. All right, so you write your little elevator pitch. Then we go on to number 5. Number 5 says path to targets. Don't think of targets like a war. Think of targets to the people that we're trying to get to. So imagine, going back to our little school idea, if we wanted to build a school that's going to aim to get young adult families who have kids who would need a preschool and who could afford to pay what we want to charge them in order for us to fundraise, we have to understand, do we know how to get to those parents? If we build something, would we be able to tell them that we've done this so that they can avail themselves of it? This is no different, for example, if we were building a food bank, do we know how to get to the people that are hungry? Just us having it in there, as much as I like that movie Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come, is not really a good philosophy to put a lot of risk on. You know, you want to know, yes, we do know how to get them. If we were doing the skate park that I mentioned earlier, do we know how to get to the young people? If we were doing a contemporary service, do we know how to get to them to let them know that it's here? Right? That's what we mean by path to targets. Do we know? And it, like I said earlier, it's okay for us to say, you know what? We hadn't thought about that. And we need to come back and think about that a little bit more, because we don't know how to get to them. We know they're there. We did the research. We saw it with our own eyes. But we need to figure out, like, what are they on? What are they watching? So that's path to our targets. Number 6, it is possible for us to find partners in this work. So if you're doing a food bank, you might say, like, is there a nearby grocery store that before they throw out the what's called the ugly fruit, right? The little banana that has a little bit of brown or whatever it might be, before they throw it out because nobody will buy it, can they give it to us so we can give it away so that our food bank doesn't just have unhealthy sort of dishes, that we can actually have some fresh food? But if we're doing, for example, the idea of the pre-K, is there anyone we can partner with? Could we partner with the National Episcopal School Association to call it an Episcopal school? And what would that look like? Because we think that that brand would add to what we're doing. Could we partner with the school in Los Angeles that's already doing it to learn from them so that we don't have to make those mistakes and our learning curve would be shorter? That's what we mean by partners. There's generally somebody out there that can help us do this work so that we're not doing it alone. So as we're looking for partners, just think, be wild, be creative as we're thinking of who might we partner with in this work. Now, as much as I said that you don't have to go in order, number 7 and number 8, I would encourage you to do in order, which are funding sources and expenses. And here's why. If I tell you, if we have this amazing idea, we're going to build this school and it's going to be great, and we're like, great, awesome, let's go ahead and look at our expenses. Like, well, to build a new building, it's like, okay, that's going to be already $1 million or $2 million. Where are we going to get that from, right? To hire this or to do that, if you begin by looking at the expense sheet first, that number will always be bigger than if you begin by looking at how much money do we have, and knowing that number, how do we make it happen for that money? There's a difference, for anyone who's ever been in business or an entrepreneur, there's a difference between bootstrapping and being like just overfunded with a lot of money. Those are two different approaches to the same thing. So I always suggest, look at how much money you have before you go out and figure out whether or not how much it's going to cost you. Because if you're like, and we're going to buy all new equipment for the classroom and all new desks, and we obviously have to have some of those smart boards that bring in the internet, and also, tens of thousands of dollars, whereas like, listen, we got $10,000 total, can we do it? It's like, all right, so we're going to scrappily look at where we can find little chairs and where you find ways of making things happen. Doesn't mean that it will always match up, by the way. You will sometimes need to be like, okay, we need to get a little more money. But when you begin looking at it from what are our funding sources, your overall budget will always be lower. Because you're like, how do we make it work for that amount rather than the other way around? I've seen really good ideas die because, bless you, because they begin with it's going to cost us this amount and all we can raise is this. And so it's done. Dead in the water. Does that make sense? Why that mindset that you go into when you're doing those things? By the way, when you're looking at expenses, and I'll talk in a moment about minimum viable prototypes, because let's say that we were going to build a school and that we wanted to do a school. One of the things that we at TriTank, that we are, in the 96 experiments we've done, we always look for a partner that we can actually give them the thing once we do it. We are a proof of concept laboratory, which means that we don't run things in perpetuity. We launch them, we show that they work, and then we pass them on to other partners to continue running them as ministries. So it is possible for you to figure out whether or not there's a there before you build it. So in fact, let me just finish real quick here. Number 9 is key metrics. What this means is, how will we know if we're succeeding? If we're building the little school, we can be like, well, it more than pays for itself within whatever number of time it might be. It might be that we need it to pay for itself in year 1, but whatever. If it's a ministry that we're doing for young adults, we might say, well, we need to have X number of young adults show up. Or at least the ones who show up. It doesn't matter how many show up. As long as one shows up and they say, I'm willing to come back, that's good enough. Right? Now, in the key metrics, it's important to realize that you won't always get those metrics as you're winning, but you might get something else that you didn't even expect because of God's abundance. I'll give you an example. This was, how many years ago now? About 7 or 8 years ago. I used to, so my nieces and nephews, they're young adults. The oldest, I think now, is 31. And so think back a few years, they were in their mid-20s, and I was like, I need to reach them with the scripture. I need to reach them with Jesus. I was like fervent missionary for my own family. And And I'm like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do some 3-minute little videos about the gospel, and I'm going to make them funny, and I'm going to do little cutaways that go to little funny videos. So I might mention like Jesus on a boat, and then you see a little boat that's like floating in the water, and like Jesus, right? And they're actually kind of funny. I think they're well done. I like them. So I did these videos, and I did them for a whole season. I did like, I think it was like 22 weeks worth of these videos, and I was producing them with the little cutaways. A friend of mine would edit them. We'd put them online. The video that got the most views ended up getting like 12,000 views on Facebook. I was like, wow, really amazing. So I went in and I talked to my nephews. That was my key metric, right? My nephews were the ones I was building these for. And I went and I'm like, so what do you think of the videos? And they're like, what videos? I'm like, the ones I'm putting on Facebook for you all. And they're like, oh, we're not on Facebook anymore. I'm like, oh, Jesus. So by my key metric, I failed. But I was like, who are those 12,000 people watching my videos? And it turns out that for people that take communion to people at home who are homebound, that this was an excellent way for them to have a little mini sermon of the Sunday's gospel. So they're like, we would show up, we would say the Our Father, I would read the scripture, I would play your 3-minute video, then we would do a quick communion service and I'd be done. I was like, I never knew that was a thing, that people watched little videos when they went to visit people, or that there was this need. But that's who it was. And the reason we found out is because when I stopped making them, they're the ones who reached out to me, saying like, when are the videos coming back? I'm like, oh, look at that. So all that to say that in your key metrics, you may have something that you're measuring, but be open to where God's abundance might be like, yes, you wanted this, but I needed this. And you're like, on it, God. So remember that. So I just want to finish before we go into our little pods here in a moment. Any questions, by the way, on these 9 points? Yes, ma'am.
So did the videos come back in any way, shape, or form?
They did. I was able to find a missioner in the Diocese of Indiana, because remember, we're proof of concept. And she was able to keep doing them for people that would take them to Homeward Bound, but then she just recently switched jobs and is no longer able to do them. So to do those 3-minute videos of the Sunday Gospel. If you ever want to see them, by the way, they're still online. If you go to ambo.org, Ambo as in the preaching stand. Remember how we churchy people use terms nobody knows? See, I just used a term nobody knew. We even do it to ourselves. Other questions before I move on to on the 9 things. You think you can fill one out? Yes.
Can I ask a question about playfulness, actually?
Sure.
So, when I was hearing you talk about playfulness, I was hearing that kind of in conjunction with giftedness and abundance and all of that. And some of the things that we're trying to address or engage are not playful in and of themselves, right? So how do you engage homelessness? How do you engage opioid situations in your towns? So can you talk about how a spirit of playfulness
Yeah.
might enter into that kind of discernment when you're talking about the development of ideas? So can you just contextualize playfulness? Because I think there's still a way.
Sure.
But I'm just curious how you can contextualize that in the context of some of the things that we've been.
Absolutely, and thank you for bringing that up, actually. One of the things that I normally say when I'm giving the whole presentation about playfulness is I usually say it this way. If you do a brainstorm session and nowhere during the brainstorm session do you laugh, do it again. Here's why. When we gather as the people of God and the Spirit is among us as we're coming up with ideas, something happens. And it could be that we're coming up with ideas for incredibly difficult and things that it's like really smart people have dealt with these things. How are we in a small congregation going to deal with the opioid epidemic when the government that has been trying to do this, right? These are big challenges. But here's something I bring to you as good news. When we gather as small groups to do this work, the Holy Spirit is with us. And there is something about when the Holy Spirit is with us, you feel it in each other's energies. And if you let the seriousness of a problem be what overtakes you, the energy, unfortunately, may not lead you to the best ideas. The most creative ideas that I have seen are when we're laughing. So here's another example of that. The Virginia Theological Seminary, who actually employs me, thank you very much, they just celebrated their 200th anniversary. Their bicentenary, actually, we don't call it a celebration. We marked the 200th bicentenary because this was a year also when Virginia Seminary wanted to make it clear that we recognize that the seminary was built by slaves. And that although we have a reparations program, that we still have a lot of work. So we weren't so much as celebrating it as saying we're marking it because we're also acknowledging that our past has some issues, right? And that was the difference. But even in that space, when we were coming up with ideas, and it was their problem. They invited me in to give ideas. I was going to be like, yoo-hoo, big ideas. So I was like, okay, here's what we need to do. We need to get a capsule. And inside this little capsule, we're going to put a Bible, and we're going to put a diploma from VTS, and we're going to put some curriculum, and we're going to send it out to space. And then once it's out there in space, some alien in these trillions of galaxies will eventually get it. And when they get it, we will have graduated the first intergalactic seminarian. Boom, mic drop, right? It wasn't a serious idea, as you might imagine. I don't really know Elon Musk personally to be able to ask for that favor. Nor do I like him as a person, actually. But it brings that brevity. It is by us being able to dream big, that's where the playfulness comes in. When we are able to say, he just gave a really crazy idea. Here's something that I thought was crazy, but now in comparison to his dumb idea, all of a sudden it seems very down to just the fact that it's on this planet makes it better, right? So it is that playfulness space that allows for creativity and for us in some ways to get out of the way to let God be creative. One of the things that I mentioned in the book about brainstorms, and I'll just finish on this before we go on to I have time, please. So when you're doing a brainstorm, we all know how to do brainstorms, right? You gather in a room, you set up a timer, you have a leader, and you start doing ideas, and you put them on the board. The way that I have found brainstorms work the best, and it leads right into the playfulness, is you do what's called T+5, time plus 5 minutes. And that's the total number of ideas that you need to come up with. So say, for example, that you were going to do this for 15 minutes. We're going to brainstorm for 15 minutes. How many ideas would we need? 20, exactly. 15 plus 5. And the first 5 ideas, just so you know, any person, average person down the street could come up with those first 5 ideas. If we started here, there's the bell curve, we all would be in that middle part. We all would have those similar ideas because we're churchy people, we do churchy things, and we think churchy ways, right? So that's normal. But it is the ideas at the end, when we have the time pressure on top of us, that we're like, ooh, we need to come up with something. And that's how you end up putting up a capsule in space. And what you want to do, though, is those last 5 ideas, though, generally is where you find those that, stand your little hairs on end, and you're like, ooh, if we did that, how cool. I mean, not for nothing, but if we had been able to put a capsule into space, how cool would that have been? That would have been something really cool, right? It's one of those things that just makes... Now, hopefully you'll have some more earthbound ideas that you're actually able to do, and that's what I mean by playfulness. It's this walking in there saying, even though the challenge we have before us is immense, we walk in there, and with God's help, we know that we can face it. And so if you don't find levity when you're doing a brainstorm, this is when I say, go back and do it again. Just stop. If you're 10 minutes into your 15 minutes and no one is laughing, no one has laughed at all, and it's just that serious, just take a pause for a second and say, is this energy conducive of the best ideas? Or do we need to be a little bit more playful about this? Because that's important. That's where the Holy Spirit can show up. Thank you. So let me talk to you a little bit about the minimum viable prototype. This is, that's the demonstration, isn't it? Okay. All right. Viable. with a V.
Oh, I know, fine.
Minimum viable, V-I-A-B-L-E.
Thank you.
Viable prototype. Is my Latino coming out? Is that what you're saying? So here's what you want to do. A minimum viable prototype says, what is the least we need to do to prove if there's a there in our idea? So I'll give you an example. Imagine that we did want to build the little pre-K and that we wanted to, in order to fund our ministry. And we're like, we think we have all the research. We think we've done it right. What might be a minimum viable prototype of doing that? Maybe you put if you're, let's say that the cathedral wanted to do it, and I'm guessing that this is a street that has a lot of traffic, right? Right? So if you put a banner there that says Arts Preschool coming, and you put a website, and you measure how many people go to that website, and after a month of that banner being up there, no one has gone to the website, you might be like, uh-oh, we might have an issue here. Or you can run some ads. The target audience is going to be young adult families, which means that we would target primarily Instagram because that's where they are at. And if you run, say, $100 worth of ads on Instagram, touting how wonderful your pre-K arts school is going to be, and nobody clicks on those ads, we have an issue. We need to go back to make sure that our market research that we've done about our area, whether or not our research actually is showing anything to be true. But notice the difference though. We spent $50 on a banner or $100 on Instagram. We spent $150 to possibly say we were wrong. We can't have a school here because there isn't a market for it. Versus if we had gone out, built the school, put it out there, and all of a sudden no one's showing up. You're like, I have 6 teachers sitting down on their hands, not doing anything. It's like, oops. Right? So that's a minimum viable prototype. If you were doing, for example, if you wanted to think about the possibility of doing a service on Tuesday nights for young adults, instead of saying, we will have a Tuesday night service for young adults from here to Kingdom Come, you say, we're going to do a one-night event aimed at young adults. And maybe you do a battle of the bands or something that would be similar to what you're going to end up offering. Or just call it a safe space to discuss mental health because we know they're into it. And then as you do that, and guess what? If you tried your best and you thought you had a path to get to them, and you advertised it in all the right places, and you had friends invite their friends, and you still end up with no one showing up that evening, well, you've only spent one night. And maybe that wasn't the one for you. Maybe that's not. And by the way, in all of these things, what you always go back is like, we don't think it's working. You always go back and figure out, why didn't it work? Is it that there aren't people here, or is it that our offerings are not to their liking? And then you can go back to step number 1 and do a little bit more research to figure out, go and talk to parents and say like, hey, we're thinking of doing a pre-K school based on the arts. Do you think this is something your child might like? Would you send your child to something like this? Oh yeah, that sounds interesting. Or no, I really don't have, $1,500 a month is a lot of money. It's not going to work. Then you do the numbers, and it's not going to add up for you to do it and be able to raise money. So a minimum viable prototype, which can be based on Google Ads, I'm about to throw at you. Just write this term down because you're going to want to Google it later. Google Grants. Who's familiar with the Google Grants program? 1, 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, 5. All right. Did you know that as a nonprofit, you are entitled to $10,000 a month from Google and free advertising? So that if anybody in your neighborhood were to type in the words anxiety, for example, you could own it. So if a young person says, you could actually own the keywords that say, is life worth living? So that if someone's thinking about committing suicide, a young person, what pops up would be an ad for your congregation saying, we want to talk to you. Before you take that drastic a choice, talk to someone. We'd love to talk to you. No commitment, nothing else. Just talk, just call us. Right? These are called Google Grants. And it's not that they give you money, they give you a total of $348 a day, every day of the year, which comes out to $10,000 a month, that you're able to use in Google advertising. So there, I just gave you each $10,000 a month. You're welcome. So the Google grants are a great way of trying out your minimum viable prototype. If you have an idea to do church for dogs, and that's how you think you're going to get all your neighbors to come, or to do church in the outside. This is Vermont. Church in the wilderness should be a big thing here, except on better weather days. You know, church outdoors could be a really cool thing. That might work. Some of you probably already do this. But let's say that that's the thing you're wanting to do. That's a way that you can advertise it. So that if people are like, what are the trails around me? And you can offer them a free sort of trail thing. Yes, ma'am.
There really, it's a comment. There really is a church in Maine that you can only get there by boat.
By boat? Wow. There's only one church, there's a church in Maine that you can only get to by boat. It must be Episcopal, because we always make it so easy for people to go to church. Where could we put a church that would make it extra difficult for people? I know, on the island. Oh Lord, help us from ourselves. So, do you understand more or less the concept of a minimum viable prototype at this point, right? What is the least thing that we can do to try before building out the whole thing? If you're thinking of a new service, try it one time. Don't put it there forever. In fact, I would encourage you, this is just total side note, if you're starting a new ministry in your congregation, can I encourage you to start it with a sunset date? What that means is, say, this ministry starts today, and unless we choose to continue it, it will end on this date. Because we're Episcopalians, and if we do it twice, we've always done it that way. And all of a sudden, we end up with a dinner that no one's going to, and it's a pain for everyone to do. It's like, why are we still doing this? Because in 1912, yeah, you know, we do that. So I would encourage you, if you're thinking of a new ministry, begin it with a sunset date. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't continue it. Obviously, if it's working and everyone's having fun, you continue for another set of time. But beginning with a sunset date allows you to not have to kill a program. Why do we even use those terms? Kill a program. You end the program, you honor what it did, and you say thank you. But it's no longer serving its purpose, and you do something else, right? That's what I would say. So that's a minimum viable prototype. So what we're going to do now is, when you break off into your pods in 1 minute, ooh, I was good. In 1 minute, when you break off into your pods by team, by congregations, is just take one idea of the ones you've been thinking about. That all of us have ideas. Just think of one that your church has been considering. Or if not, just come up with one for now. Say, oh, this idea of the preschool sounds pretty good that he's been talking about. Or doing something for young adults. Just go with one of those. And say, what do we need to do? And fill out the mission canvas. Because when you walk home, if you go home with one of these filled, what this is doing, it is setting you up for success as you take the next steps. Because it'll let you know what you still need to find out, what you do know and what you don't know, and what you need to do to be successful. All right, so who's in charge other than the bishop? Do we just send him off on, do we just say go off and be free, little birds?
So this
Wait, microphone.
So this is, good afternoon everyone. So this is the opportunity for you to really put into practice part of all of this is the didactic moment for you all. This is the moment for you all to write down and say, okay, we love Lorenzo. We'll teach him about Mocha Joe's and other places other than Starbucks. It's fine. But this is the place for you all to get a chance to say, this was really exciting, and we don't want to lose this momentum. We want to have joy with it. So break into into groups of the delegates that you came with for your parishes, and if your delegates are only 1 or 2, maybe try to find another delegate. We're going to have to reach out of that Episcopalian comfort zone and say, I recognize someone else who might be sitting by themselves, and form little pods of about 4 or 5.
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
4 or 5, and take some time in this next period to really start thinking creatively about what you're going to do. And you may not do any of them, and that is totally okay, but it's not okay to not think of anything, because this really is the time to practice learning how to ride that bike of just trying things on with the ideas.
All right, everybody, as we gather back, welcome back. Yay! What was that? Oh. So, how'd it go? How was that? I sense excitement. If I could sing, I would sing a song about excitement right now, but that would be a deal killer for most of you. Be like, I'm out. Who needs the oils? I'm out. So who wants to share and debrief? Not just I'm excited to hear. I've heard from some of you already about some of your ideas, and they actually sound pretty cool. I would love to hear some more. And does anyone want to share with the rest of the diocese what you've come up with? Yeah, come on up. Come on up and share. The mic is yours. You take it back.
Okay, good afternoon, Jack Manning, Calvary Underhill. You are my peer group, okay? This is a test, all right? So what this arrives from is we do a soup supper and bread supper every once a month on Thursday nights. Our parish attendance, most services is maybe 12 to 15. We usually have 40 people show up at soup supper, so we count those numbers for our parochial reports. Anyway, it's a bit of an institution, and the idea is we identify a local fundraiser that's not necessarily associated with the church. It doesn't go into our parish fund. It's free will offering. You get a lot of people there that you don't normally see. This is Calvary Underhill, okay? So we're right on Route 15, and we have several high holidays. There's church, Easter, and then there's Harvest Market, because we sell a lot of sausages, and that's when people get to know us as well. The concept here is to expand beyond our soup supper, which is in the Undercroft, which is 5 to 7 p.m., and add to it what we're going to call a soup and sound element to it, which would mean there'll be sounds upstairs between 6 and maybe 7:30. And those sounds could be music, it could be poetry, it could be storytelling, it could be comedy, it could be, I don't know, somebody's trip to the Holy Land or whatever. But the bottom line is we would want to use that as an opportunity. It's the concept here being no cost dinner and entertainment for all ages. So the idea is build on something we already have and see if we can't promote it. We know who the stakeholders might be. It doesn't really cost us anything. I mean, there are risks. I mean, there's parking, there's a whole bunch of other stuff. But Dave sat with us from St. James and offered some things. So anyway, it was a seed of an idea, and I thank you for prompting us to play around with it a little bit. And I've already made 3 phone calls to some of our parishioners who think it's a great idea. I've got a dinner party tonight for locals. So how, you know, and this bit about validating it, when you said, would anybody like to present their ideas? I mean, what a peer group to put this in front of, right? So by all means. But my thought was, by the end of this month, which would be the last Thursday, will be our last soup supper after Thanksgiving. So what's the entertainment going to be? We're going to have our organist play Christmas carols, and it'll be a sing-along. How easy is that, right? You get to do the whole thing. We can run it on Front Porch Forum, and we'll know in 30 days whether it's a good idea.
Yay!
Okay?
Well done. How about that? Come on up so you can be next. One little bit, by the way, as you were talking about sharing knowledge and all that, I have a wonderful article that I pulled from The Guardian about how to run a salon. Do you guys remember the salons like from Paris and all that, where one person comes and shares knowledge? And so if you send me an email, anyone, by the way, can send me an email if you ever want to talk about your ideas. I'm Lorenzo at tritank.org. Just drop me an email. I'll be happy to talk to you. Just do know, I leave tomorrow's Sunday. I leave Monday to go to Singapore, and I'm going to go for 30 days. So it might take me a moment to respond back because I'm going on vacation, and then I'll be working from Taiwan. But after that, I'll be happy to. But I'll send you that so you can use this as a framework of how to do it. Come on up. You're next. Tell us your name and where you're from. It works.
Well, I was trying to get a little bit closer to my voice. Not that I need it.
I'm Judy Shank, and I'm from St. Paul's in White River Junction. We're part of a 4-church constellation: St. Paul's, St. Barnabas, St. Martin's, and St. John's. Has to take me a while. Had to take me a while on that one. And so the 4 churches, we just met in the back because we don't necessarily know each other. And we thought this would be a good way to start really building that constellation. And we do share Bible study with St. Martin's on the 1st and 3rd Mondays, and they can come on anyway. So what our thought was to work as a constellation, but to share because of our location. Each church would take a turn over the course of the month, and it's a feeding program. Because there is such a need for people, for seniors who are by themselves to be able to get out and have company, for moms who are running around with young kids, taking them to basketball and baseball and hockey and this stuff. So we were thinking about on a Saturday, and basically a luncheon, because a lot of people don't like to drive at night, and during the winter, the snow and the ice, makes it hard. So we're working on making a calendar, figuring it out. I don't know what I did with my notes here, I'm doing this off the top of my head. And so our targets are seniors, moms with young kids, anybody who just wants to get out of the house, no charge. For people who feel like they really want to pay for the food, we will have a basket off in the corner that they can leave donations in to help us with that. It probably will be put on by the parishioners, and each parish will come. When it's at St. Barnabas, all of us that can will go up to St. Barnabas and help them prepare it. When it's at St. Paul's, they'll come and see us. We're going to use attendance as the key, whether it's working or not. And no, we're not going to do it just once. We figured that each church should have a chance to do it 2 or 3 times and then make the decision, because with everybody's schedules, it's kind of hard. I hate to tell you, my husband's birthday is today, and my kids are with my husband celebrating his birthday. and I'm here. So, I asked him, is it okay if I go? And he said, go. After 52 years of marriage, let me tell you, that's fine. Let's see. So we did the community, we looked at our stakeholders as to who could say yes or who could say no, and we know that the vestries could say no. Whether they will or not is another story, but where they could say no. The parish as a general body could say no. That, no, they don't want all these people coming into our parish halls, because that's where it would be. When it's St. Paul's turn, we're at St. Paul's. When it's St. Barnabas's, we're at St. Barnabas. When it's at St. John's, and I hate to admit this, I don't even know where St. John's is.
Let me introduce myself. I'm Kathy.
Wait, microphone. So I was gonna hear you too.
Okay, we'll do this in front of everybody. I'm Kathy, and I am from St. John's, Randolph.
Oh,
so it's very
hi,
nice
it's
to
pleased to
meet
meet you, Kathy. I wish you could have been with us. No, we didn't know where
We
you
don't
guys
even
were.
know each other by sight
No,
yet,
no,
so-
we haven't gotten that far yet.
Working on
And
it.
Jenny's the one that comes back and forth to you.
Yes, Jenny
Okay.
Anderson will be at
Yeah.
us in St. Barnabas.
Yeah, Jenny Anderson flips between St. John's and St. Barnabas, and Scott Neal flips between St. Martin's and St. Paul's. And yes, it gets very confusing. It will get better. So if I start doing a roll call, don't worry about it.
I love your idea. I think
I'm
it's
so
great.
glad that you're good, because you guys are going to get involved in this.
Whether you like it or not.
Yes, whether you like it or not. And we talked about advertising. Yeah, I know. We'll get in touch. Sally, here's another hat. What am I doing? So I think that's pretty much everything that we did, and plus introducing ourselves to each other.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Did you have the hair color before you left your husband for the day and said like,
Certainly.
okay.
It's my
Or is he going to be surprised? Like, surprise, honey, happy birthday. You know, one of the things I really love in working with some of your congregations is this new model of constellations. And for those of you who, like what just happened now, if you want to get to know the other members of other constellations, there's a program that we've been trying to, I'm a huge proponent of it in the US that's brand new. It's called the Being With program. And if you're not familiar with it, I will gladly send you the PDF of the Leader's Guide. It is an amazing program for 10 or 12 people over Zoom to gather for 10 weeks. If you really want to get to know other members of other congregations, I commend this to you. Like I said, just drop me an email and I'll send it your way. In fact, I just thought about this. I will be on a flight home tomorrow evening, so if anyone sends me an email between now and tomorrow afternoon, that's what I do on airplanes. I respond to emails, so I will send you these things before I leave to go to Singapore. But the Being With program, just real quick, is 90 minutes, 30 minutes about what's been at the heart of your week. No one else speaking, just you share your story and we hold it and say thank you. Then we enter the wonderings. Like one of the examples is, I wonder if there's ever been a time in your life when you have felt that you have been set free of something. And then there's a little reading of scripture which brings it all together. And so, for example, when the questions are about being set free, the story is the story of Exodus. And all of a sudden what we realize is like, that time when I came out, or that time when I went to AA and was freed of that, was God working in my life that time? And it allows you to realize the Holy Spirit has been with me all along. I just didn't know it. And so it's a beautiful, vulnerable program. It's very like Brene Brown, for those of us who speak that language. So if any of you want to try it, as your constellations are getting to know each other, this would be a beautiful, wonderful way of getting to know people beyond just like the, hey, where do you live? What's it like? How do you pronounce Battleboro? Oh, for crying out loud. I did do it before, Brattleboro. Woo! Thank you. Anyone here from Brattleboro? Barrel? Okay, there we go. Thank you. All right, I will try to get it better. So who wants to share next? We have a little bit of time. Who wants to share? Oh, come on down. You're the next contestant on The Price is Right. Thank you. And the microphone's almost long enough, you know.
Is that The Price is Right?
That is The Price is Right. $1.
Well, I'm Ernie from Trinity in Rutland, and we decided that we want to, the elevator pitch, seek what 20 to 30-year-olds are looking for in a spiritual community. Design questions, survey what youth want in a spiritual community. Our solution, craft a survey with 3 questions, a QR code. Secondary questions can pop up if they mention the J word. We don't want to get too Jesus-y at the first time, but if they mention it, who can say no? Our vestry, we have a very strong shadow vestry. Let's see, number 5, path to targets. Booths at Speakeasy, which is a very popular coffee shop. We can talk with our membership about what they find young people want. Table at the farm museum, a farm market. Worship services, we could have those maybe outside of the church, perhaps in the coffee shop. Go to a bar. We have a very famous drag night, so we can go and talk with that community. Number 6, partners. The Rutland Mental Health. The mayor's friends. We have a very young mayor in Rutland, and he's quite successful. A few other places that we can go to. Number 7, funding sources. We have an outreach and evangelism budget at the church. The Google Grants, of course. We can ask members for gift cards at the coffee shops. And we would like to maybe eventually have a workshop at Mission Farm. Number 8, we can do some coffees at the coffee houses and maybe have some dinners. booth fees at the farmer's market, Instagram, and we've got some energy, so.
Excellent, thank you. One of the ways you can also do it, by the way, is you can have QR code coasters for bars or for coffee shops.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, you know, I'm not the chief innovation officer for nothing. No, I am the chief innovation officer for nothing. I don't know why they gave me that title. Like, oh, all right, got promoted. Anyone else want to chat? Anyone else want to share? All right, come on up, Stan.
Two things. Shout out for Randolph, which is, they will tell you, the geographical center of Vermont.
I heard.
Yes, and also Burlington. They say the nice thing about Burlington is it's so close to Vermont.
Oh.
So you've been close to Vermont. Now you're going to go to Barrie. You're going to be in Vermont. So we decided that I'm not going to tell you all of the steps, but our elevator pitch is something like this: a monthly encounter with the divine mystery, incense, sound, and pizza. We also felt that whatever we do to reach out to young adults helps us reach out to everyone. That it's not just we're going to bring in college students and young adults. Those things will be appealing to everyone. So we're kind of jumping off from that to the universal, which we strongly believe. And we think this space, which is beautiful, does not lend itself to stained glass and darkness, but for evening things like an encounter with the divine mystery, it would be perfect.
Awesome. Thank you. Was it incense, sound, and pizza?
Yes.
I love it. Love that. Well done with that. I do want to mention also, all of you in the diocese have access to Mission Insight. So if you're trying to find out what your neighborhood looks like or who lives in your neighborhood and what are they like, that is a great place to begin your secondary research, is to really get an insight into your missional community. Also, the Episcopal Church Foundation has a free vitality assessment for your community. So figure that out. There are some free resources that are out there for you. So if you just avail yourself, I'm sure that Jeremy or the Bishop's office can help you out with some of those. The Episcopal Church Foundation is at ecf.org for them. How are we doing on time? We have 10 more minutes. Anybody else want to share? Yes. Walter. Come on up.
I just want to clarify for those who have not heard the term Mission Insight. It's a program that the diocese has, because we paid for those who were at the hearing the other night. Mike Shapiro talked about automated church systems, which we used for our diocesan finances. Mission Insights will tell you all of this demographic information about your community. And so the way that and if you're not familiar with it, your clergy, and if you don't have a clergy, your senior warden should be able to get that information, i.e. get how to log on to it, and Father Jeremy means cost, and some others can show you how to do it, or set up an actual appointment with the Mission Insight folks to walk you through how to do it. It's really good. So you want to, if you haven't done it, I encourage every parish should have at least one person who's done the demographic research on your community. Mission Insight, contact the diocesan office to figure out if you don't have access to that. We gave a presentation to the clergy about 8-9 months ago. I can't remember when. So I don't know if the clergy, if y'all have done that or not yet, but it's really helpful.
Excellent, thank you. All right, as we're coming up on time, I just want to once again reiterate to all of you that I want to be your conversation partner in this. So I already work with several congregations in the diocese. If you have questions as you're going, sometimes this path of trying new things can be scary. And I recognize that. And you know why it's scary? It's not just because it's change. It's because we're changing something that's so dear to us. Because it matters to us. So it can be that much more difficult to try something, and God forbid it fail, because then we feel we let God down. So I know that. I've been doing this work now for 6 years, and I carry that with me. So if you want to enter into conversation with someone who has tried, who continues to try, and encourages others to try, I set aside time in my schedule every week to talk to people. So just feel free to reach out to me, Lorenzo at tritank.org, and I'll be more than happy to set up a time for us to talk. Second, rest assured of my prayers. The same way that I offer my prayers after the floods in July, you are in my prayers every day. I'm a priest who's deeply rooted in prayer. I believe in prayer. So know that I'll be praying for you as you're doing this work, because I recognize that the mission field is a little bit different than what clergy were trained as. I was talking to Kevin earlier today, and I was like, so you were totally trained how to deal with contractors and with this, that, and this? Like, no. It's like, I'm like, if the contractors were only in Greek or Hebrew, we'd be fine. But no, they're apparently in English, and we don't know how to. So I know that the work is hard. We've seen what a huge number of early years clergy are burning out at after their ordination. So know that you're not alone, and you're in my prayers as you do this work. So you are my friends, and I take you in my heart, and I'm so glad that you invited me back. So thank you for having me, and I hope that this was good for you. Yes, ma'am, before we finish.
I couldn't come last year. I'm very sorry I missed it.
Yes. She's saying she's sorry she missed me last year. Can I get you to record that for my mom? Well, actually, true story. It is my mom's birthday in a couple days. Could we do a quick little video for her where we all say happy birthday? So her name is Christina. So I'll just say, hey mom, I have a message for you, and I'll put the phone up, and she'll be like, who are all these people? And you'll say, happy birthday, Christina. And she'll be great. Hey mom, just wanted to say something, and I have a couple friends who want to say something for you today. There you go. That'll make her day, and by that, it makes my life. So thank you all very much. Yes, Jeremy.
Before you go, can you tell people about the library of experiments that are on your website?
On the TriTank website, thank you for my shameless plug. On the TriTank website at tritank.org, you can find many things. One, we have several workshops that we've done, how to learn about Generation Z and what they're all about, how to deal with ChatGPT and how to use those prompts, we have a whole bunch of things there. We also have a list of all the experiments we've done. So if you're looking for ideas like, what should we do? You can go on there and see the experiments. But I would commend also to you, sign up for the TriTank newsletter. It is once a month. We don't inundate your box with news. And in the newsletter is when we also put out calls. Because whenever we do experiments, we do them in the field with you. The difference is we pay for everything to make the experiment happen. So we might be like, we're going to do an experiment in X, Y, and Z, and we're looking for people to join us. And if all of a sudden Stan reads it's like, oh my God, they have pizza money, then we can do the experiment together to see if sights, sounds, and pizza is a good thing. So that's the kind of thing we're looking for. So just subscribe, and it's a good little read. It also shows you other resources we had come up with. Yes, ma'am.
Are you in Lynchburg, Virginia?
I am actually in Los Angeles, California. My office is at Virginia Seminary, which is in Alexandria, Virginia. Yes. I don't know how far or not from. I know Virginia, but as well as I know Vermont. So, any other questions? Yes, in the back.
This is just a quickie.
Yeah.
I would appreciate it if you'd stop picking on the altar guild. You know.
You see? I'm not going to make it home, am I? I tell you. Good thing I did that video for my mom. That's it, I'm dead. Another one lost to the Altar Guild. I love the Altar Guild, trust me. It is because of my love and fear that I make fun of them. Any other questions before we turn it over to Bless the Oils? And with that, God bless you all. Thank you very much.